I have absolutely no idea where anything is.
It's recording.
Perfect. So welcome everybody to the April 2020 Global Board of Directors meeting. Present from the Global Board, in the order that I can see, is Gary Robinson, myself, Owen Pendlebury, Martin Knobloch, Grant Ongers, Sharif Mansour, Vandana Verma, and Richard Greenberg. We also have a number of members of staff, and that's all that I can see in my list. So first point of order is to approve the previous month's meeting minutes. So a motion to approve the March 2020 meeting minutes.
Could you please mention it's a recorded meeting?
Okay. So for everybody online and everybody that's listening, we have recorded the meeting, which is why you're listening to it. Thanks, Martin. I don't think I ever caught you out like that. So I wish I could go back in time. So a motion to approve the March 2020 board meeting minutes. Can I get a second? So in the order that I can see, Gary?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Sharif?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And me, so yes. Perfect. So moving on, Mike, if you wouldn't mind bringing us for your report, please.
Yeah, sure. So, well, it's two pieces. So you've got the organizational KPIs that you can see. Probably the most notable piece of information in those KPIs is the fact that our website traffic's down slightly. We saw that kind of beginning in the first part of March due to coronavirus. It's starting to pick back up. So we're obviously monitoring that day to day. But it is slightly down, and we saw it across all of our sites during the coronavirus. We've also kind of seen a little bit of a dip in terms of our SLA on our non-funding tickets. Most of that's related to just kind of capacity to get things done at this point. It's not systematic of something else. It's just a matter of us trying to stand up an event in 3 weeks. And so we've been ignoring some of those tickets. And those are mostly those are not chapter expenses. That's the service ticket queue. These are other items that are submitted to staff for completion. I'll skip our financial because I'll let Tom do that if you scroll all the way down.
Cool. Mike, in relation to the organizational KPIs, the membership, have we done any research into why or how the membership is down? Is it just people not renewing, or
membership is actually up, and that
increase. Sorry.
Right, that increase is mostly due to the free memberships that we gave to AppSec California attendees.
Okay.
And the site traffic, have you guys looked at the root cause as to why it's dipping, where it's dipping compared to last year?
It started dipping, well, just by looking at the trend week to week, it instantly started to dipping when the coronavirus lockdown started to occur. So if you were to look at week by week, our traffic has fallen in coordination with the coronavirus. My assumption is that for a variety of reasons, people are not coming to our site the first couple of weeks of the coronavirus. It's kind of come back the last couple of weeks, but those first 2 weeks, our website traffic was down. And I'm going to attribute that to the coronavirus outbreak.
That would mean that also the people use our website for work and not for when they're off work.
Yeah, it was still working, so maybe they're just working on other stuff. There has been surveys saying a lot of cyber people have been moved on to IT projects due to lack of staff and other things, so that could account for 16% loss.
Yeah. I think we should monitor this. I don't think it's cause for alarm at this very moment, but obviously we report on it every week, and I look at it, every month, and I work on it pretty much every week. If you scroll down to my report, which is at the bottom, Just real quick, you know, all this stuff is here, obviously, for you to read. But obviously, I put together this new business plan that we'll talk about here today, and we've been modeling that. That's kind of the top piece of this. We have applied for the payroll protection plan, and we're in queue. If you're not in the U.S., you may not have heard that the funds were depleted rather quickly. Congress and the president just refilled it. But what's notable, important to note is even if we do get it, there's obviously conditions on the loan. It is forgivable if we use it for payroll, but it's not necessarily a transformative impact. The amount we applied for was around 42,000 US dollars. So that's kind of the COVID stuff in terms of, and we've been working with chapters when HAST as relates to doing virtual events, all that kind of stuff has been happening behind the scenes. When it comes to conferences, as you know, we started the virtual AppSec days yesterday. I've been sending pretty regular revenue updates. I think we're at about 140,000 US dollars of total revenue from the event. Obviously, a large portion of that does go to the trainers. The information you see right there in the report in that second paragraph under conferences is as of the 25th. And I can provide some more data at the end of the day today because Capture the Flag closes this afternoon, or I say tomorrow morning. And there's just a little bit of revenue coming still from that. Obviously, you know, I wanted to give a shout out to staff. I mean, we, you know, 3.5 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago at the last board meeting, this was an idea. You know, we had kind of started working on it, but it wasn't where it was. We also, the conference that went off yesterday, you may not remember, but we finally got all of our speakers to confirm a week ago today, which is when we started marketing it. So we basically had a week to market a conference where we had, you know, over 1,000 people sign up and almost 800 attend, which is pretty incredible. I will point out, so when it comes to San Francisco, the papers and trainer calls for have been closed as of last week, as originally planned. You can see kind of where we are. Those numbers are about where Dublin's submissions were, but slightly down from San Jose numbers in terms of the number of submissions. I know that the committee, or the program team, I should say, is planning to, you know, look through those, and if there's a need, they can reopen to add additionals like we've done at previous conferences if we don't feel like the quality is there. Kelly's been selling the contract, as you know, and there's also still sales in the pipeline that she's trying to work. It has slowed down, but obviously she's still working on it. Let's see.
In relation to San Francisco, based on previous global AppSecs in the United States, where do we rate? Are we far away from a, say, revenue perspective on sponsorship and so on?
I don't have that, and I don't have that in front of me. I do have that data compiled to track against. I mean, I think right now things are kind of, well, let me put it this way. The $400,000 of contracted revenue was at the beginning of March. And since March, we've only been able to add $120,000 to the pipeline. And the assumption is that, again, this is related to, you know, the general business slowdown. So we're obviously monitoring, and, you know, I meet with Kelly every week to talk about this. So that's the current status of things. If you'd like to, I can prepare kind of a, you know, weeks out from the event where we should be kind of a model. We do have that someplace.
Yeah, it would be useful for all conferences, I guess, just to understand where we are tracking with the previous year. I do know that, well, like if San Francisco doesn't go ahead, then I guess there's potential other issues with giving back that revenue. But hopefully things die down with.
Last time we also.
COVID.
Yes, Vandana.
Vandana?
Yeah. So last time we also discussed that once the conference is over, we would do an outreach for donations. So did we make any progress on the plans around it? Because this conference is going to get over, or like with the trainings by tomorrow. After that, like a week or so, we can start planning on the donation drive.
We will talk about that. I still have that as a request. We'll talk about that in the slides, about the plan. We did make a call for donations yesterday at the conference, and we received 1 donation. Now that was not very aggressive. It was just a passing comment on a slide.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. So just to kind of keep moving.
Actually, you also mentioned about membership on the
Yeah, I did.
the conference. Did we know whether anybody has signed up?
Well, we have people sign up all the time. It's hard to attribute. I'd have to go back and look to see how many we've had since yesterday morning.
Yes. No.
All right. So anyway, so just to keep moving. So the next paragraph is about, you'll see something on the, actually you should have seen something on the agenda for later today about contracts as it relates to San Francisco in 2021, and then also Berlin in 2020. We'll get to that later in the meeting. DEF CON application, we've modified for a larger booth. We're coordinating with the outreach committee and a couple board members on what that effort will look like. Black Hat has also been submitted, so we'll see how that goes, but that's all kind of in progress. The next thing is on the website, the SEO engagement with the firm we have will end the first week of May. We don't plan to renew it at this point in time. Their view is that the migration's complete. It's really a matter of enhancing and improving SEO. And again, given the current economic climate, it's currently my plan to not continue in that work with them at this point. But anyway, so that's kind of where we are. And you can see the list of all the things that got applied. They're outside our website traffic research showed that our search visibility on the site since our launch is down only 0.6%, which they considered a best-in-class metric for a site with as complicated of a remapping that we had to do. They were kind of stunned by how successfully we've been able to move across this dangerous bridge. Work is proceeding with the DNS VM migration. You may have seen that. We've actually moved our DNS being served from Cloudflare now, which is actually getting us slightly better performance increase because of caching. We still have been unable to staticify the wiki, which is what we're in the process of still trying to do, so that way we can decommission, any persistent services like MySQL and whatever dependencies. But we're still working on that. There's the metrics on chapters. Still 57% of chapters, and well, actually, yeah, 57% of chapters and 58% of projects have yet to migrate. You can always monitor that on that link that's there if you're curious.
Mike, in relation to the projects, are we planning to do anything to get the rest of the migration over to the new sites? Like some of the big players that I mentioned, the code review guide and a few others still aren't migrated. So I would assume that a lot of the kind of, we're losing ground on that kind of side of things.
I know on some of those,
like professional perspective.
On most of those bigger projects, we've been reaching out to project leaders to see what their plans are. I mean, it's not really, actually it's part of this community review process. We do need to have a conversation about the website and unmaintained content. It's been there, and it's just something we're gonna have to manage. But right now the plan is to defer to project leaders as much as possible. We also have some, potential topics to discuss as well as it relates to the freedom that projects and chapters have. There's been a couple of behaviors that I don't think helps support the foundation, but we can talk about that at a later time.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that we get the projects moved over because chapters are a lot more kind of free-flowing, whereas projects are what make the foundation the foundation. So I would kind of look to maybe put a hard date on getting that information over in the not so distant future, in order to the website move technically is like based on those figures, it's only really 41.7% complete technically. So like if chapters are active, then we need them to move over. But some of the projects are very, they could be static and they could have been made for one purpose only and never maintained or never altered after that. So it's very important that they're moved over.
Yeah, we should ask what they need and how we can support them. Yeah.
It might be the case, even maybe we can get some volunteers, some college students or something like that, and give them preferential discounts to our conferences, or some of our training. If we're doing the AppSec days again later on in the year, that it might be beneficial to offer some discounts to that, or first refusal for being our proctors or something like that. Just to, it's very important that we get that information over as soon as possible.
Yep. All right, thank you. That's all good ideas. The community review process, which there's not really much to talk about there. That's actually in the process of being developed. It's actually turned out to be a little bit more nuanced than I think just the idea of setting up a mailing list for people to make comments about. And the idea is that we're in the process of developing something that will not just to collect the feedback, but help us define roles and then a methodology for how we come up with a final work product. And the person, Trisha, who is a virtual resource, has been helping me do that. She has over 20 years experience dealing with the IEEE and their specification process. So reconciling conflicting feedback is kind of her valley house. So we'll see, and I'm hopefully to have that by the next board meeting. Let's see here. There's some quick staffing updates. I mean, one of the things that's kind of in progress right now and in flight is we are shifting around Dawn and Lisa's roles. Probably the biggest change is that Dawn won't have primary responsibility for community/chapters. And we're going to have her focus more on operations and some of our internal accounting, interfacing with virtual. And I do want to recognize Lisa for being very willing to accept these new responsibilities. We have some things to work out, but it's currently in flight at this moment. And then finally, retooling of the IT, not really anything substantive there. Yeah, I mean, it's just basically kind of business as usual for migrating to a CRM. We also have been kind of considering what we might do about Meetup. I became aware of the fact just the other day that we spend $32,000 a year for the convenience of using Meetup, which is quite expensive. I know there's some discovery opportunities there, but it might be something that we may look to pay some attention to in the future, because it's going to be one of our higher IT bills once we get the site completely off of Media Temple and the like.
Do we know why it's so expensive?
Because they like to make money. And actually, what's very amazing, Gary, is we actually are getting the nonprofit pricing. The regular business pricing is like per attendee, and it would be like over $100,000 if they applied the for-profit pricing model. Harold and I, by the way, have already started talking about this, not just because of the 32, but we've also been considering that we might need to have a quick backup plan. If Meetup were to decide to change their business model, we would be in a really, really bad spot very quickly. And so we've been talking about it, but again, we've been trying to get a bunch of other things done too. I just wanted to make sure you know that this is something that it's on our radar. And as always, if you want more update on all the projects, you can go look on www.staff.
Can we ask them also for the Corona? A lot of people and companies ask for discounts, seeing the hard circumstances. So can we ask them for a special discount for this special times?
We can. I mean, we already get the nonprofit price for Meetup currently.
Yes, but it's a non-profit price in non-Corona times. Now we need a non-profit price for Corona times.
Yeah.
It surely must be one of the largest spenders. Like, who else be spending that much for Meetup?
Yeah, I don't know. I would. Go ahead, Sharif.
It was actually Grant. Martin, are you sure you're not Dutch?
He's been living there too long.
Careful.
I lived there for more than half of my life, and I have Dutch ancestries, to be honest. I'm really European. But let's move on. Come on.
We're going off target. Yes, absolutely.
All right. And so thank you. I'll turn it back over to Tom if there's no other quick questions. Because Tom's the financial report, which is the next thing in the agenda.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for going back up. Owen, so we got this out with a few days for you all to take a look at it. So I'm hoping that you had a chance to read it. The things of note are looking at the P&L here. It's a combined P&L. We're ahead of, we're basically right on budget through March for revenue, but we're way under budget, 79,000 to be exact, under budget for expenses. Most of the line items, are under, except for a little bit in conference, which is offset by the travel, which was, we spent a lot less than what was budgeted for the summit, I believe in February. To Owen's point, what I think I want to start doing with this is to compare it to budget, but also compare it year over year. The issue is that because I have to run a combined report out of QuickBooks, you can't run a combined report for the US and the EU on a year over year. It's more of a manual process. I have to go back and get last year's Excel sheets. However, the fact that we're not doing an awful lot through the European entity anymore, I may do the comparison just on the US side. At least it'll give us something to look at. Same thing with the balance sheet, so that we can see where we are year over year, as opposed to just the budget.
That's an interesting point you make, that we don't do much on the European side. So I wonder, because the European entity is there for a reason, and there have been a tax cut and make it easier to reimbursement and stuff like that. So how comes that we're not doing reimbursement stuff from the European entity anymore?
That was intentional. Mike, do you want to take that?
Tom is better to take it, but I will say that there's kind of an open action item, I think, for the officers to make sure that the European board and the signatories on the European accounts are current. And I know that's been an outstanding issue for some time. Tom, is there anything else? And what I have been basically working with Tom on, and Tom, you can add, but I basically have said, until we get our signatories cleaned up on our European bank account, it seems to be prudent to keep as little money over there as necessary. Tom, would you add anything?
Yeah, I understand that money is necessary, but we don't do little. And the same is that when you currently have a reimbursement, let's say for $100, you actually have to pay your half % in money. So if I have my own costs, I spend $100 for OWASP, I get only 97 back. And that's something should not be.
So I'll answer it this way. Yes, you're right, Mike. Until we get the signatories straight and the bank account straight, and that's been an ongoing issue for the last 2 to 3 years. Also, we cleaned up, there's a due to, due from, and right now, we're going to go through an audit for the year that just ended. We've got it straightened out, but it's basically what's due to the US, because the US has been paying the bills, is basically what's in the European accounts. I mean, there'd be some funds left over, but not an awful lot. At this point, Martin, what I'd like to look at, we looked into it for another client, is to set up a TransferWise account to make payments. The fees on that are much less than doing a wire. So, instead of losing $3, you might lose 50 cents.
Yes.
Everybody has a transaction fee.
There's several reasons for having a European entity. That's one for the tax. The other thing is European bank account. But one of the reasons was that in the past, also maybe it's not even related, but now when you do a reimbursement, I don't get 100% reimbursed because I also have to pay the transaction money. And that seems not what we want for ours. So I thought that when I see when I did a business, when I transfer money, I can choose if I take the whole costs or if the costs are split in both parties. I don't know, it's not really relevant in this, but I have to, just want to make sure that this has also been taken care of, because I have people that said, my example was when I reimburse $100, I get 97 back and $3 are transaction costs, and that should not be.
No, Martin, what he was talking about is not comfortable.
I know what he was talking about. I was talking about
no, but
to be addressed.
But the other thing is uncomfortable with regards to who has access to the bank account.
I think we're working on that now at the moment.
I did understand. Yes, I got a point, but I want to make my point too. Thanks.
No, and I got it, Martin. And the other way to deal with this is to gross up so that the person that's getting the reimbursement gets the full reimbursement. That's another way to do it that I've also talked to Mike and the accounting team about. So it has been heard that, that there's exchange fees that the person that's getting reimbursed is getting, hit for. and that's not entirely fair. But we've got some other issues to work out as well, as Sharif and Mike were pointing out.
Thank you.
Yep. So if there's no questions, I'll turn this, back over to you, Gary, and like I said, let you guys know that I'm going to work on trying to put some year-over-year numbers together so that we have something else to compare to as well going forward. And this is the balance sheet. As you can see, we've got $1.4 million in the bank, which is not bad. The receivables keep going down. They went down by, I think, 90 grand over last month, so the collections are coming in. Part of the other assets is that due from that's from the European entity. We have accounts payable that most of those have been taken care of, and our equity is $1 million. So not bad as we sit here today. However, the world has changed since the middle of March. So I know Mike's got some slides that he and I have reviewed to talk about later in this meeting. So.
Any other questions on that? Anybody?
Yeah, I just have one thing. Tom mentioned that there is a process that can help the community when they are putting a reimbursement. So can you share it with us, Tom, so that we can share it with the wider community? Because there were questions which came from community. That's when Martin raised here. Martin raised all those questions here.
Right. So there's two different things that we can do. One is setting up an account through an organization called TransferWise, which is much less fees to the person receiving the reimbursement. We set that up for another client. So we're working on setting it up here. There's not really a lot of fees to us, but there still is a fee to the person that's receiving. The other way to handle that is to gross up. In other words, what that means is to add in whatever those fees would be. So if the person was to get $100, you give them 103 for them to get 100.
I remember that in my bank account, when I had a business, I could say that I pay the whole transfer, the whole fee. It's not splitted. Can't we do that?
This seems very operational, and we only have half an hour left.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we can take this offline.
I'll look into it for you all and let you know, Martin. And if you want to connect with me about what you just mentioned, happy to look into it for you.
Yeah. But I would not be happy for having a lesser fee for the reimbursement for our volunteers. They should be without cost. Okay.
Yeah. Just to note, everybody, there's a number of us on the call from the board that have pretty unstable internet connections at the moment, and that keep on going down. Mine went down twice within the last 5 minutes. Luckily, other people were talking, so just in case I cut off at any stage or any of us, just to let you know. So moving to the new business. Mike, do you want to? The first one is you, I think.
Yeah, the first one is me.
Yep.
So, and I'll read the motion. Someone would have to move it because I'm not obviously a director. And I'll just tee this up. So basically, we have either the paper in hand or the paper expected in the next week or so to actually sign agreements for the next San Francisco. So the the North America event for 2021. And for the European event for 2022, all right? As you may remember, we were planning to go to Berlin in 21, but because of coronavirus and moving Dublin to February, we felt prudent to move Berlin out a year. We were able to get a pretty favorable date in the May timeframe for that. And you can see what the total budgeted expected total cost would be. And then the other one, item B, is, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we went to the hotel in San Francisco where we were planning to have the event this year. If we were to cancel that event today, it would basically cost the foundation about $120,000 in penalties. Now that's assuming there's no COVID force majeure. That still may happen, but until we show up and there's no gatherings, we have to assume that we'd have to pay that penalty. So what we did is we negotiated with the venue that by July 31st, we will let them know if we're going to have the event. If we choose not to have the event, I should say it this way. Oh, no, we just lost him. Now I need to I could do my screen, I guess, if I have to. Did Owen just drop? No, you just changed your screen sharing. Yeah, so what I was just mentioning is that, so what we did is we went to them saying, hey, look, if we commit to next year, will you give us a better deal if we have to cancel last minute? And what they've come back with is a very attractive offer that if we end up having to cancel at the end of July for 2020, this is in San Francisco, that they would only, quote, make us pay $32,000 of a penalty, and then they would also credit an additional $32,000 to 21. So kind of like what we ended up doing with Tel Aviv, there's like a balanced deposit forward. So it's very attractive deal for us. And what we have to do is basically just commit to go there again in 21. It felt like that was a prudent plan. So that's what Emily and I are suggesting. So this motion.
So
just to clarify, yeah, so does that mean if it does go ahead this year, we still have to do it there next year anyway?
Yes, that's correct. We would do it 2 years in a row in the same venue, basically for the agreement that it kind of gives us out of a very negative financial problem this year, if that makes any sense. It's not optimal, but otherwise the cancellation fees would be much, much higher. And so that's kind of the compromise agreement. So with this motion, if the board were to approve it, would basically give myself and whoever I need to delegate some of those responsibilities to for us to begin executing against putting those two events together. They are both outside of this fiscal year. That's why it's an additional board resolution. And that's what that is.
So we would lose 120K if we didn't do that. Do we have any idea of any downside of having it 2 years in a row in the same location, coast, whatever you want to call it? Would that be 120K hit?
I actually, what history has shown is that the best location in the entire United States for this event, actually for the entire world, has been the San Francisco Bay Area because the concentration of the tech sector there. So I don't see it as a negative. I don't think we'd want to, in fact, he had previously talked about maybe putting these events and keeping them in the same place. I'm not recommending we do that. I'm just saying is that as a trading chip with the hotel, by committing to next year, they were able to kind of forgive a much greater percentage of the penalty if we end up having to cancel.
Yeah, I think
Richard, you're on the ground. Do you have enough? Sorry, Martin. Just after you chat, if I could ask Richard to know his sense in, because he's on the ground and knows that area better than the rest of us.
it just says in the past we once asked the community if we keep it on a location or make it a movie conference or keep it a movie conference. And I think if we choose to change the model, then we should ask the community again, because I said the conference has two sides. It's not one. It's not money. It's also the community. And you definitely in Europe, when you move to conference different countries, you also engage the community in that area. Just to make sure that it's not only the financial side of the conference. Okay.
So I have something to add on to it, what Martin just said. So now, first, we need to ask the community. Second, when we are talking about the property, can we have like the same hotel chain at some other location?
We would have to explore.
Is there a possibility?
That would be something we'd have to contact the individuals at the hotel about. We chose the path that we felt would get us the best advantage if we had to cancel this year by just agreeing to be at the same venue to kind of reduce the complexity of trying to make an arrangement.
Well, I think it's definitely clear that it's really good that if this year will be cancelled, then to go to the same hotel next year, I think that's a very smart and very logical reason.
People on the ground do get wrapped into doing a bit more work, so is it fair to the chapters that are local to put that extra work on them?
Well, actually, the new model for the global events, the program team is continental. And so the current team working on San Francisco, I think there's only one person on that team that's even based in San Francisco. So our primary ask to the local chapters will be promotion and volunteer work. So it's actually a fairly light lift for them.
It was the same with Dublin. There was people from Tel Aviv and
Yeah, from all over
countries as
Yeah.
part of the team. Okay.
I think with the COVID-19 issues worldwide, the community would be more than understanding if, for once, as an exception, we would have a repeat performance in the same city. I don't see this as a big issue.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And I will reiterate, this is not the plan. This was just the negotiated situation that we find ourselves in. There is,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know what the, go ahead, Martin.
If I understand correctly, you said if it would be cancelled, and there's no question about it. If it's cancelled, is proposed. The same for Spirit Plans for Europe. We couldn't do that this year, so we moved to the same venue, I think, next year. So I think there's no question about if there's a logical reason or something that, yeah.
Yeah. And Mike, when do we need to inform them that we're going to either cancel it or not?
Yeah, the agreement that we have in front of us, if we sign, gives us until July 31st to make a go, no-go decision on San Francisco 2020. If we move forward at that point in time, and you know, we can roll the dice. If we move forward with going and saying, yes, we are going, but the gatherings of more than 50 people are still restricted in October, then we'd be able to execute the force majeure piece of our language. But we won't know that until the day the conference starts. And that's why there's increased level of risk. So we're trying to do the safest plan based upon the changing circumstances that we have.
You know, as prudent leaders of an organization, we have to face the reality. It is unlikely we're going to have San Francisco this year. Let's be realistic. We want to be hopeful, but even if the bans are lifted, even if people start to gather again, you're going to have some companies that'll be reluctant to send their people into a large gathering. You're going to have people who've been spending all this time at home with their families that are not going to want to bring something back to those families after all that they've been through. So you're going to have way reduced attendance no matter what, even if it does happen. So, you know, we don't have to make a decision now, but we should proceed as if we are going to cancel it without actually doing that. And which is what I believe Mike is taking an approach similar to.
Maybe we have more attendees because everybody wants to flee from home.
Well, that's possible.
But also, they might not want to use their holidays on going to this and spend time with their families.
Yeah.
So
on that note, Martin,
to move this forward.
Yeah.
Move this forward to motion to authorize the executive director to exercising all the necessary due diligence and care as individually authorized to obligate the funds of the OWASP Foundation to execute agreements reflecting those obligations and to further delegate the authority as deemed appropriate for the purpose of organizing and hosting the Global AppSec in Berlin in May 2022 and Global AppSec in San Francisco, November 1, 2021. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, who was that? Richard?
This is Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, and going by the order that I see. Ruby, Gary?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Sharif?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I'm yes.
Mike, can we try and negotiate there a worst case scenario if 2021 doesn't happen as well? I don't want to have to make the same decision next year.
No, it makes sense.
I think now is a better time to negotiate that than this time next year.
It's a very good point, Gary.
All right. And I will point out real quick, because this is going to lead into our next conversation, just to correct one thing that Richard did say. Technically, staff right now has to work assuming that it is going to happen. Because because then when I talked about this, we can't just say we're pretty confident it won't, but we can't start marking an event on July 31st, because that only gives us the 10 weeks until the conference actually happens. So we're actually planning for 3 different scenarios as relates to this event: that it does happen, that it does not happen, and that it also is a hybrid where we have an off and online pieces of it. So it's actually quite more complicated than it may initially seem. But thanks, Richard, for pointing that out. I agree with you.
So moving on to the next point, approve the revised 2020 budget plan, Model Z, in response to COVID-19's uncertain negative impact on finances of the foundation,
right, so
which is these slides.
Exactly. So I'll quickly run through these. I did provide these as a pre-read, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to take a look at them. Just as a recap, the board did request staff to model what would happen if we canceled San Francisco. I should have changed the order of this, but the assumption is that, well, as I started working on this, it occurred to me, if San Francisco gets canceled, it's unlikely other events through the rest of this calendar year will occur as well. So the models that I put together assume no OWASP events for the rest of the calendar year. There are 3 models that were developed in addition to the original budget. They're labeled A, B, X, and Z. And of course, if any event returns to the calendar, the way this model's been built, it's all upside. So we're assuming no revenue, no expenses from those. If we decide, for instance, if LastCon happens, then that would be revenue that we would not have planned in the budget, which is the most conservative way of doing budgeting, which is what I would recommend. So there's that slide. Any quick questions? Again, everyone had this a couple days ago, so hopefully you've had a chance to look through it. So I will go quickly. Also watching the time here. So the 4 different models, and this is a lot of numbers, but the place I want you to focus primarily on is the cash on hand line. So this is how much money we would have, starting with where Tom says we are today, if we follow the current models. Model A was the budget. We know this is off the table. We were showing a net profit this year. That's why you see it a little bit more rich than the 1.3 or 4 that we have in the bank today. Model B is assuming that we cancel all the events, but we take no spending cuts. We spend exactly as we had planned. And by the way, that's not the events, that's all the other line item budgets. If we keep doing all those other line item budgets, we basically would lose $1 million this year, which would deplete our cash reserves down to basically a 2-month reserve, because our monthly expenses are around $100,000 to $110,000 a year. Not obviously a very good strategy. Model X is the assumption where we make cuts, which I'll talk about in a second, which is really more caps. We just say, okay, we're not going to spend more than this amount on these budget line items, but we don't take any corrective action on revenue. That also would deplete, we would lose about $500,000 in that scenario, which would draw down our cash on hand to about 800. The notable and biggest numbers of those caps would be travel costs. I will point out that that includes half of a project summit, a full project summit, and 2 board meetings that were already scheduled, plus staff travel. Those are all numbers that are wrapped up in that travel number. There was quite a substantial amount of money in marketing in the budget for this year, not just to support our events, which we'll not be doing, but also to support the 2020 version of the top 10 list, which we discovered yesterday has been postponed. The next item is chapters. So our annual chapter budget is $250,000. So far this year, we've spent 41 through the end of March. We would assume that with a pretty quiet quarter and then 2 more quarters back to where we were, it would be very hard for us to spend more than $150,000 on chapters this year, just by the nature of where we were and the COVID situation. So we decided to make an honest, cap out of the chapter budget, assuming that we would land around 150 anyway. So that's how we wanted to document that here. Because we're not having conferences, our banking fees would be drastically reduced. This is the commissions we pay for credit card transactions. And there would be a very, very small cap on projects spend. Neither chapters nor projects have we ever spent, as much as we had budgeted this year. So we feel like those are fairly conservative in terms of the caps that we put in place.
What was the marketing budget before that?
I think it was around, I'd have to look, but it's probably around 2-ish, maybe something around there, 200,000.
Okay,
so there's about
cutting 90%.
Basically cutting all of it. Basically cutting all of it, for the most part. And for those of you that run businesses, I mean, what we did is we looked at the discretionary spend, is where we tried to focus our energy. It's the simplest to cut because it doesn't affect people, for instance.
I just looked it up for you, Mike. It was 215.
215. There you go. Pretty good guess on my part, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the Model Z, which is the one that I'm going to recommend that the board adopts, is basically all those similar caps However, also including some revenue attainment activities. One of them is the AppSec days. As we already saw yesterday, that looks like a pretty good model that we should be repeating. The amount of money we've already made at this last one would be included in that 240, so we may be able to overachieve that number. And the other thing that I've been asking, and actually Emily actually came to me with some ideas as to how we think we can actually, even if we have to pull off San Francisco virtually, that we're looking to find ways to generate about $300,000 of revenue, even if we have to go virtual for that event. So the net of all of those activities would make a more graceful landing, that we would have about $1 million in the bank at the end of the year, which considering the drastic impact of the coronavirus on all economic activity, in my opinion, is actually a pretty successful glide into the the end of the year, if that makes any sense. Are there any quick questions on this before I get into a couple of these in the next few slides?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I think I heard you say this, but I wasn't sure. Are you proposing cutting our full marketing budget, or what would be left?
There'd be about $35,000, of which the notable items in there are money for DEF CON, if it happens, Black Hat, if it happens. We have been having a marketing retainer for some virtual stuff, which is why you saw the really successful and aggressive email and Twitter activity leading up to this last AppSec days. And we would continue to do those types of things. And I would expect we would need to have those resources because, if we are going to try to pull off AppSec days every other month, we're actually going to have quite a bit of activity needed to continually promote those events to new audiences.
Yeah, my concern is that we're cutting too much out of marketing. We still need to get OWASP chapter information as well as specifically even more projects information out there to companies, and also potentially look for grants. I don't know if you have a line item for grants, but I would think that's potentially folded into marketing. So, I think that's one area that we need to still focus on because it's essential to our mission.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to conferences. Think of the workers. They're going to be looking out for how do I find stuff now that I'm not going to conference ABC to have the stuff handed to me. So there's still a sense, yeah, maybe not the full 100%, but might be a bit of a sense of doing that. Some marketing.
Something that would be useful for the foundation is a marketing plan that governs the entire year. What kind of strategy and all that kind of stuff from a marketing perspective, what we'll do as a foundation and what we'll cover off throughout the year, what kind of marketing and PR and stuff like that we do for our conferences and so on, and maybe some of that can be adopted by the chapters and regional events as well. So we should put some effort into trying to get somebody to create that marketing plan.
Yeah, it's a to-do that was due this month, was to come up with the annual marketing plan, because the operating plan was so late in getting adopted. I hadn't started on it until we had an end date set. And of course, now this virtual event kind of got in our way of basically any deliverables at this point. I'll go back a slide real quick.
Sorry.
So real fast. Just one thing, the virtual events also are marketing kind of. So if you do virtual events, so it's kind of does more than that. So I think it's okay.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is the marketing number needs to be increased, or the amount of decrease needs to be reduced.
And hopefully cancel this off, because I do think you're going to get more companies putting 10, 20, 30 grand into something like OWASP because they're not able to sponsor InfoSec or Black Hat.
I would be very conservative in forecasting a lot of revenue growth when it comes to sponsorships. The most valuable place that people have historically wanted to put their money is conferences. It's been somewhat of a hard sell to get members. And with some of the recent conversations on the leaders list, if we begin to remove recognizing our supporters from our website in places, I think that'll have a further negative impact on our ability to raise money from corporate members.
Well, there's a compromise there, so don't worry. We'll wait. No, we'll make that work.
That's another
Yeah,
topic I know for another day.
Yeah, cool.
All right,
Just
so-
conscious of time.
Yeah, I know. So real quickly, we know about the virtual OPSEC days. I'm not going to, again, you've had these slides, and then the live streaming stuff, which I've talked about, also something that we've been brainstorming on. Some other income development ideas that we have kind of dismissed for the time being. Go to the next slide, slide 5. Fundraising campaign. This kind of goes back to Vandana and Sharif's comments. We did do an audit of this, and I know Tom has also seen this also from the other clients he has, is that there's kind of a sense that a fundraising campaign for humanitarian causes, like food and shelter, economic relief, first responders, those types of things would be successful. But at least currently, it's my view that the optics would be pretty unfavorable if we tries to raise money for, a first world problem like web security at this point in time. It's not that we're not going to do it, but right now we've kind of tabled that idea for the time being. So we did not build it into the revenue model. Doesn't mean we can't do it, just means it's not in the revenue model. We also talked about membership dues. We decided that's not something to talk about. We also talked about, should we just do advertising on our website? We decided that was not within the scope of OWASP. And so we've also we've also tabled that idea of other quick ways to get revenue for the foundation. So the recommendation, there's a couple of these pages. One is to approve Model Z. You can kind of see kind of the specifics there around the money. We also would like to kind of make the regional event and local event organizers aware of the fact that we would want to have a moratorium on contractual commitments at this point in time. In other words, we don't want to commit to having an event, and signing a contract for another venue in this calendar year if we don't think that if we don't know if it's going to happen or not. Obviously, we'd have to notify those folks in their community that have been impacted by this. There would be no cuts right now to the current staffing plan that we've had in place that we discussed last month at the board meeting. With it, we would schedule, plan, and execute no less than 3 of these virtual days, and we'd have a plan for doing in San Francisco virtually or hybrid if necessary. That's all. So let me go to slide 2 of recommendations.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So by not signing contracts, I would assume that's also, that's going to impact things like conferences like AppSec Cali, LastCon, and so on. So
all right.
I think that's it.
To my knowledge, off the top of my head, the only contract that we currently have signed for the remainder of this year is San Francisco, which is the global event, and LastCon. I've not been presented any other contracts to sign for this calendar year. What I would be recommending is we have a moratorium on doing that until we get more clarity on where things are going.
How would that affect AppSec Cali?
Yeah, I would assume, remembering last year, I think AppSec Cali's contract came in within the next month or 2. Is that correct, Richard? For next year?
I have been holding off on that due to the current environment.
Okay.
Richard, we can work with you to come up with maybe a way to navigate that. So let us know.
Okay, cool. Perfect.
All right, so that's
Sorry,
1 of 3. Yeah, next slide. So we've already talked about, this first bullet we've already done. And the second one, which is what we just talked about, we are still planning to have Dublin in February at this point in time. We are working to source a 3rd global event in 2021 to kind of help make up for some of this lost revenue in 2020. And as I've already mentioned, at the end of July, we need to make a decision about San Francisco. So that would be teed up for the July board meeting to make that decision so we can do it as opposed to via email ballot.
What's our exposure if Dublin doesn't happen in February?
Emily's not on the call. She's running 11 training classes today. I don't know for sure. I can let you know, Gary. I know that they were pretty kind. Well, again, these things keep changing. If you ask them today, I'm sure the answer would be different than if we're still in a lockdown. So, but I can follow up with you, Gary, to let you know.
Thanks.
It'd be useful maybe to follow up with them just for some contingencies, just in case it doesn't, just in case things keep on going and we're left cancelling that as well, or potentially postponing it to later on in the year.
All right, and then the last thing is that this is more just kind of to-dos, is that I would want us to proactively schedule. We are going to be doing, the standard reporting anyway, but I would want to reserve time on the June and September board meetings just to keep a fairly close eye on how we're doing against some of these caps. I also have been kind of lobbying, as you know, most of you have known. I really think it's a good idea for us to execute on low risk ideas, which I think is the AppSec Days is a good idea, rather than trying to come up with more high risk new things we've never tried before recently, and that we would park some of those activities into 2021, which we've already been talking about in the past, which is a certificate program as well as a grants effort. Nothing mean we don't start now. We would plan to start diversifying, but we would not make a commitment today in those two activities because they are typically higher risk items when we're having kind of a budget crisis in front of us.
It must be not. It's not new for you guys. Certificate program. I always am.
I know you're nervous about
electing, so this cannot be without a bigger community support.
It's a much bigger conversation. It is a much bigger conversation.
Thank you. Just
grants
make sure
are relatively simple, though, surely.
Yeah, I have no problem with grants. A certificate. So.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying from a work item part of view, that just apply for them.
Well, I think that go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a lot of work in actually applying for grants, right? It's not, yes. It takes somebody from staff committed time to do that.
Yeah.
Can we briefly go back to the previous slide, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at the July board meeting to make the go no go for San Francisco.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So that's towards the end of July.
Yes.
Are we're okay to do that from if we go with the plan that we have in place, but is that soon enough for the community to make that decision?
When you say soon enough to like, well, what I wanted to document is we have to let the hotel know by July 31st if we were going to hold the event. And our thinking was that, the call for papers and call for trainers has been closed. They are reviewing those at this time. We actually will have a straw man agenda, I think, by, I don't have it in front of me, but I think by the middle of next month, and I'd have to look at the projects page, but I think we are actually in the process of being prepared to launch registration as early as the 1st of June. Emily's logic is that we should launch registration and let it run for a while and kind of test the waters to see kind of, are people willing to start committing now as an additional data point for us when we get to the July board meeting about that decision. If we have 10 people sign up, then we know we're in trouble. Whereas we've had 200 sign up, then maybe we go ahead and things have changed and we move forward. But it'd be another data point is the logic.
Okay, so that really is the July board meeting is the final moment at which we can make that decision. We may make the decision earlier, but we probably will hold off until then. To Richard's point about people not wanting to travel or companies not allowing people to travel or whatever the case might be.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to pull up.
In that context, Richard, how is California going with the local, what's the status? The situation in California regarding the corona?
Still sequestered home. There's been talk about partial openings. School is shut down. It's not going to open up again until, I don't even know if they're doing any summer schools. I don't think there will be approval for any large gatherings regardless for the foreseeable future, but they might be a partial business opening to help the economy.
How is it compared to other states in the US? From how hard Corona hit you?
Just take a look at the political map and look at red and blue.
I know. I meant about.
No, I'm answering your question. Hold on. Blue will be more resistant to opening because they have larger metropolitan centers in general. Red will be more likely to start opening because the economy is more important than life for those states.
No, I meant about how seriously are you hit? Is there a difference between California to other states, or like in Europe? Is California better or worse?
It depends on each state. And again, if you've got a large international city in your state, you will be more likely to be more conservative because there's a denser population in a central core.
Okay. Martin, to give you a little bit of an update, so Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York have been the hardest hit. because of the ethnic backgrounds, because of it ripping through nursing homes. You know, Seattle, Washington, and was hit hard. California locked everything down. We're in the process. I have a client that has a conference that's supposed to start the 1st of July. That's not going to happen, but we're working with them to try and move it to next year. So, Richard, that's what we're hearing too, is that there's not going to be any large gatherings in California for quite some time.
Yeah.
Because I know that, I think Kelly said it too, New York is already said to the end of the year, no large gathering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of places in Europe as well are saying no large gatherings, and they're blocking borders and stuff like that as well until at least the end of September. So,
and that's why I asked about Dublin, because that's only 2 months after we're already talking about these things being locked down. It's some risk.
Yeah, I think it's important to have contingencies as well for early next year, if possible.
Yeah, no,
just to sorry, it's just we're conscious of time.
I also want to maybe just some a note to our community, because some states and countries are hit really, really bad. So we have to think about it, not offline from this, but to think something about for our community to talk with them. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Mike, did you want to go through the likely questions, or will I move on to the next?
No, I think that, I mean, I picked this in here to kind of eliminate a lot of the conversation. I kind of brainstormed what would be the most likely questions to ask, and I tried to kind of cover most of them in these. You know, actually, if you go back up, let me just scan them real fast just to make a quick comment or two on each slide. So unlikely questions number 1, you know, chapter balances. This is a completely separate conversation. We've already talked about kind of why the numbers are where it is. About staffing right now, you know, we've already discussed some of the need for some of the roles that we've already talked about, and that's still in the process of going. Let's see here. Here's some more talk about the marketing. Kind of gives you Gary line by line of what those cuts were from. One of the questions is, how's the operating plan changed based upon the things that we've done? The good news is, based upon how we've tried to trim things, our assumption is that only the identified in red items are significantly impacted by Model Z, which is actually pretty remarkable. This is a kind of a testament to our community and the staff being able to kind of keep everything still moving while we're in this kind of current state. If you go down to like the questions number 2, I've already mentioned the travel budget. Well, one thing I do want to point out on the second slide is one question I thought people would ask is, well, hey, if we're not doing events, why is the financial impact so bad? Well, the problem is that for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, the OWASP Foundation has been on this trend of ever increasing event-related income. And actually over the past several years, it's gone up from 75 up to 86. And what's even more scary is that over half of that revenue comes from sponsorships. So when we have a cut in events, it has an incredibly material impact on our plan. It's yet another reason for us to consider diversification. The more we diversify, the less dependent we'll be on events in the future. We had a plan this year to reduce that down closer into the high 70s, but you know, obviously that got caught, kind of got shoved off path. I don't think the impact will be much on in-membership, but I did, by the way, cut growth for corporate memberships and just left it flat, assuming that we would be able to make a good sale to keep people around, but we may or may not be able to add new corporate members. Individual membership seems to be continuing on. It is very, very low. Our key benefit, we were told over and over again, is networking. If we can still deliver on that in a tight job market, people, I think, will still continue to donate and become members of the foundation. Anyway, so then the other thing I'm going to do is we did document in the operating plan 7 measurable goals for 2020. The question would be is how does changing our model to the Model Z budget impact those goals? Green means no impact. Yellow means some or marginal impact, and then red would be probably not going to happen. The 4 I'll highlight real quick is that our goal number 2 was to overachieve our financial metrics. We will not do that. Obviously, we're cutting our revenue substantially based upon cutting these events. So we're not going to overachieve our financial profit, if you will. We won't have 2 conferences this year, but we can plan 3 in 2021, which is what we're doing. And then I think the survey, we'll see how that goes. I think that because we won't be having chapter meetings, that might lead to some member dissatisfaction, but I know hopefully they'll be sympathetic to our situation. And then as I've mentioned, we're planning to keep corporate membership flat. So I do not believe we'll be increasing our corporate membership by 25%. So that's kind of the readout on what Model Z does to our goals, to our finances, and kind of generally to our community. And I think the last slide, yeah, it's just back up. I'm not gonna, yeah, this historical chart, you can look at that later. That just shows, that chart shows kind of our revenue split for the last 6 years.
Okay.
What other questions
So
do we have?
do we need to vote on this?
I would encourage the board to approve the budget plan Model Z. Yes, that's what I would encourage the board to do.
Okay, so the motion to
I have
approve
something
the
to say.
revised.
Yeah, Madonna.
Yeah, Owen. So there are few changes which we need in Model Z. We can see that we need to change certain things on the marketing side. And we need to adjust in certain way that we have proper promotions for our online events as well. We know that the offline events might not happen or likely to not happen, but then we need to have marketing, some budget for marketing as specified. And what other things we require, we'll have to have a discussion on that. Mike, you have sent us the Z plan and we are going to take a look at it. Can we have a vote on this next month if it's fine with you?
Vote now and say with the proviso of a slight change to the marketing budget.
Yeah, what we could do, Vandana, I mean, just to toss this out, if you were to assume $4,000 additional budget, for marketing these events times 6 months, just say, that's about 30. What we could do is modify this motion that I put into the draft and say, approve this with an additional $40,000 or $50,000 for marketing expenses. And then that way we can close this today as opposed to postponing.
Yeah, I think that what's missing from this puzzle is the marketing plan. So we have the information we need to properly evaluate the marketing budget rather than a shoot from the hip that I'm hearing today.
There's nothing precluding us from adopting this today and then doing another motion next month that further authorizes additional funds for marketing based upon a plan as well.
Yeah, it's a budget plan. It's not that we're spending the money allocating it for cast and iron. And as I said before, doing the online events, it's also kind of marketing. And indeed, the strategy is important. But I think we look now a step at a time. Agreeing on this or not will then forecast the future, and then we have to adjust whatever happens. The future has never been so uncertain as it has been now, definitely for the events. So I think it's not a cast iron for the next 2 years. We are not in a Eastern European market community where we do a 5-year forecast and then we adjust again. So I think we can vote on that and then we can adjust accordingly on progress.
Yeah.
All right.
So we can always revisit. So
so let's put some language in, as we've kind of said, that the marketing number will be adjusted and discussed based on review of the marketing project plan.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the revised 2020 budget plan Model Z in response to COVID-19 on certain negative impacts on finances of the foundation, with additional funds to be made available at a later date once we review the situation.
It should be monthly reviewed where it goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, I didn't hear any language, Owen, about the marketing line item.
Well, it might not be just marketing. It could be other topics within that need to be revisited. So that's why I left it generalized.
Can you repeat that, Owen? I'm sorry. Additional funds made?
With additional funds being made available upon approval, upon further approval from the board at a later date.
With
I don't think we need
first address next month.
Now, I would just urge the board, the language you just suggested on, it doesn't materially, the board's still going to pass a motion about doing something in the future anyway. So I'm not sure what that adds. With what you suggested.
Yes.
I don't know that we actually need any more language around this because
No,
we're approving the money that he wants now, and if we need to approve further monies, we approve further monies.
yes, if we have it, but yes, definitely, I think we approve it or not, and then we want to have a budget marketing budget. Sorry, that's something independently, and then we can plan accordingly, and we have to make sure that we are paying close eyes on this for every month in part of this board meeting.
Yeah,
Great.
so
So
why don't
that
we
marketing
vote?
budget is a marketing plan, right?
Yes, everything.
Yeah.
I did have one thing. Vandana, would you be happy if we vote on this right now with the clauses, supporting clauses that Owen just mentioned, and then have a line item under new business for the May board meeting for any proposed amendments to the budget? So if we
Sure.
find that something we don't like, we then revisit that in May.
Sure.
Okay.
Also, there was one more change that was required in the slides, that the OWASP top 10 would be released next year, not 2020.
Is that in these slides?
So it mentions that in the red,
was-
amber, green, what is achievable this year without any impact. So
That should not be. That should not be in the slides because it's not a budget thing, right?
yeah. But what we're approving here is
the budget
policy of the budget. So
Z.
can I get a second for the motion to approve the revised 2020
I'll
budget?
Sorry,
second it.
Owen, just one file thing, you're adding the wording or you're not
No.
adding?
It
wording's been
doesn't
removed.
look like it. The wording as it's stated
As
on the
thank you.
the page. So can I get a second to approve the revised
second
2020
it.
budget?
It was Grant.
Thanks. So Gary,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Sharif,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Vandana,
Yes.
and I'm yes. Mike, given that we are 10 minutes away from cut off from the allotted time, out of the last three, the one centralized OWASP calendar might be an easy, quick win. I would assume.
I don't get a
Actually-
point because we had one in the past. Don't we have that anymore?
We still have one. It wasn't being maintained. But I mean,
Yeah.
just for clarity's purpose, number 3, I put on the agenda at the request from the conversations happening that the board take action on the website design. The community review process is something we're already standing up. We are going to document and talk about a couple of these items on this list. I just wanted to make sure the community knew that the board had taken action to say that we are going to do this. Number 4 and 5 were added by Richard. They don't seem to be resolutions per se, but those are 2 items that I know Richard tossed on the calendar or on the.
Yeah, so for number 4, it's similar to what I just mentioned about marketing. I think that, I don't know if we need a vote, but we need to have a project plan for every conference we put on. I've worked in several organizations. If you're going to put on one of your key money-making events, you have to have a project plan. And I've never seen one, and that's really important. And it's nice to say, well, we've got a great plan, don't worry about it. But we're the board, we have responsibility for oversight. So we need a project plan for the events. And that should be a standard operating procedure. So I'm advocating that as an essential part of operations. Okay? And I'm asking both the project plan for events and a marketing project plan as well.
So it is not so much an agenda point as then you want us, the board, to request to the staff to have a project plan for the events and a marketing plan we talked about, and a centralized calendar we have but has not been maintained, right?
Right. I don't want to leave this as, yes, sounds good. I want this to be firm and ongoing.
Well, it's an operations thing, so it's down to staff to execute from
Excuse
the project plan, and it's an operations thing, so it's down to staff to execute from the conference perspective. I would assume it's Emily that's going to be doing that, and Mike, you already mentioned that a marketing plan is on your agenda.
Now, I guess what would be most helpful for staff would be for board members that have feedback to go review the project plans that are currently on the staff project page and let us know what areas that they believe it is deficient. Like if you were to click on, the San Francisco one there, we don't maintain them, because it seems like not many people go and look at these, but this is the current, project plan with kind of high level milestones, what activities are being done, all that type of stuff. So when you have an opportunity, I would encourage you to review this and come back to staff with your proposed areas where you feel like it's lacking, and we'll be more than happy to make changes to these project plans. But we've been very, forthcoming about kind of where we are with things when it comes to events. I will admit that the one that we just did, this virtual AppSec days, that thing, we were painting the airplane as it was flying kind of a thing. So there's not really a very good project plan for that. But the global events, we do try pretty hard to document, the major milestones.
Yeah, I think, as you said, we want to do it monthly, so we can reverse engineer the plan for the virtual events, make it sure that
yes,
increase
definitely.
and improve. As every process, there's not.
We think that our assumption is that this virtual AppSec day was likely. Well, I guess I'm setting expectations. That's a bad idea. But given the short amount of time we spent putting it together, the expectation is if we have almost twice as much time to market it, it will be even more successful than this last one. Is the assumption.
I'm going to temper that.
I agree.
Temper that because it might just be it was the first time and it was cool and people wanted to try it out. I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
If you have to stop to another one next week, we could test that out.
In my experience is when you come at like the same week of the month, repeat it, then of course you have a dip on the holidays and dip on the everything. But when you repeat it, then it becomes something that is known and widespread actually.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, well, I just wanted to say this real quick because I know it's been a conversation on the leaders list. There is plans for us to stand up a kind of evergreen call for trainers to kind of alleviate some of the concerns. As some of you know, we did this kind of on a fast who had been approved in the past, as opposed to trying to stand up a new call for trainers because we want to execute quickly. A couple of board members were very generous with their time to help us kind of cherry pick the best of those, if you will. But we will be having a more formal, normal process for selecting the trainers than what we did this previous time. So, but anyway, so is there a motion, Richard, you want to make about project plans? I mean, I would encourage the board just to first provide us some additional feedback as to what's missing, and then if it's necessary, we can craft up a board motion to take it to the next level if we need to.
So are you saying for the future virtual events, you'll have a little more time to plan and present a project plan as you did for
absolutely. This thing, we were making this up as we went. I mean,
it came off very well. Well done.
Thank you. And then the last motion or last item on the agenda, just to cover that off, I want if you go back.
Yeah, sorry.
So there is a calendar, one centralized OWASP calendar. I'd have to go find the URL. It was hard to find on the wiki, and it was not maintained by hardly anyone. So, the assumption is that if you have a calendar, every chapter and every meeting you'd want to put on that calendar. And I don't know, I can go dig up the compliance, but it was literally, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 chapters contributing to it, maybe 10 tops. And so when we did the new website, we felt that people would probably just go to Meetup like they currently do for their local chapters. And so we decided at that point in time to not highlight the historical OWASP calendar on the new website.
Yeah, the reason that I find it particularly attractive now is that with the change to virtual events, people around the world can attend any chapter meeting. So if they could, people looking for CPE credits, they also just want to maintain their knowledge growth. So now all these events will be virtual for the time being. It would make sense to put them on a shared calendar so people could pick and choose and see what they want to learn. It would also give more exposure to OWASP in general.
It's very also /events. It's there. So and it looks like there are a lot of events local events,
So-
but no chapter meetings. I think then you look for the chapters. But,
Yeah, Mike, it might be a good opportunity to open it up and provide the offer it to chapters, and
So
let
we
them
just need
maintain it. So
we just need to
if
talk about
possible.
what it is, because it's a Google Calendar.
It is a
Anybody
good
with
point.
everybody with an OWASP.org email address by default can add stuff to that calendar.
Yes, that's
So
true.
so we just need to make that public. I actually asked about this, chatted to Harold about it, because it came out of one of the committees that I'm on. We wanted to try and assimilate a bunch of things together.
Yeah,
But
there's
it
somebody who.
is just.
Sorry, I don't want to. There's somebody who
Right, they're
manages
breaking
this
up a little bit.
because you don't want to have it fully opened. Otherwise, you can say I don't know, Owen's birthday on there.
In the
But just to mention something bad.
I remember I got flights. So when I was in Belfast, I had a reminder that my flight was in 2 hours' time, and I got very panicked waking up to that.
But just to say, so somebody should manage this, the event calendar. I think we should ask the chapters. Maybe it's very easy for them, chapter leaders, to add something to it for global, because we have a global calendar. It's something different than a local event calendar. Big events that are also in the events. I put a link on the chat. In the past, have been also in a Google calendar, but it should be managed centrally, but not by
Yeah.
everybody. Just open it up. I think it's not right.
There has been one community member, which I think is a very attractive idea, is to find a way to ingest and collate our meetup calendars. Those meetup calendars are already being maintained, as opposed to having yet another place for someone to add. So like, I have in a chapter meeting, I put it on Meetup, and then I have to also put it over on this other thing. The compliance would be low. The best thing to do would be to find a way to ingest all of those Meetup, the original source material, into one common view that we can present, as opposed to trying to ingest it into a new calendar.
Providing we stay with Meetup based on our earlier conversation, if they don't change their pricing model.
Yeah, exactly. And I will report that currently on the OWASP event calendar, the only chapters that are pushing Austin and Jacksonville, Florida. Thank you, Martin, for visiting Jacksonville and getting them on the ball over there. But Austin, their chapter meeting is on the 26th, and it's TBT location. But those are the only two chapters putting events on the calendar. I would think ingesting from Meetup would be a better idea if we were to think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I quickly took a look and tried to add an event on the calendar, and I was not able to, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
But maybe, I think part of the issue was I was logged into my OWASP account where I have my own OWASP calendar. So maybe I just need to spend a little more time. But.
So,
sorry, Mike, just wanted to, in the past, when I set up chapters, I used to have to give approval to people to post in the event calendar.
Oh, I see. So that might be part of it too.
And Austin was on there. They today requested a meetup page, just an FYI.
Yeah. All right. Well, so anyway, so the staff can continue to talk about this and look to the community for feedback, but I think there's some value in figuring out ways to consume data from places where people are already putting it, as opposed to asking people to put things in two places.
That'd be useful. I'm just conscious that the time we've hit the time. So if there's any other conversations on those, maybe we can take it offline and start an email thread on them. So I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I can stop recording now?
Please. Thanks, Don.